Folks, it's Saturday, it's Scotland, and it's 1 p.m. That means we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is A Force for Good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. And this is going to be an exciting week and an important week in world history, because of course we've got the US presidential election on Tuesday. So I'd like to know what you think of that. Who do you think is going to win? What do you think will be the consequences for us? Send in your thoughts about that and we'll speak about that later. We'll be on our Facebook camera for the first 20-25 minutes, and then we'll be switching over exclusively to YouTube, and we'll put up the link there for the people who want to keep watching on YouTube. And please do keep watching on YouTube, because we need to get our hours watched up there, and we need to get our subscribers up there. We need to get 1,000 before the end of the year. We should have far more than that already. We should have far more than that, but we need to at least get to 1,000 in order that we can then start to take advantage of many of YouTube's opportunities that they give to people who have at least 1,000 subscribers, including monetization and things that will actually help our campaigning. So Donna says hi from Aberdeenshire. Diana, hi from Aberdeenshire. And Jenny says hello. Alan says if Trump doesn't win, every country will fall to communism. How are we on YouTube? Jonathan, yes, I have just been informed there, Jonathan, that sadly a great Scotsman and Briton, Sean Connery, has passed away just very recently, just this morning. So that's sad. God rest his soul. We loved his films very much. Derek says, have a great day from Perth. And Dorothea from Tyrone in Northern Ireland. Glad to see you again this week, Dorothea. And Paul from the great British county of Yorkshire. Well, Yorkshire is plain speaking, and there was a plain speaking woman got on the news from Yorkshire this week. Her name was Maureen Ames, and as it happens, she's 83 today. So happy birthday, Maureen Ames. And she was the lady who was interviewed by BBC, and she was talking about COVID, and she says, quote, "I think it's all ridiculous. We should never have been in lockdown. All the people that are vulnerable should have been helped and kept safe. I'm 83, I don't give a sod. I look at it this way, I've not got all that many years left of me, and I'm not going to be fastened in a house when the government has got it all wrong." Well, that was Maureen Ames, who went viral. Millions of people saw that, especially on the internet. And she's 83 today, October the 31st. So happy birthday, Maureen. A voice, a blast of common sense from the great British county of Yorkshire, as Paul quite correctly describes it. And Paul mentions the problem with hate speech. We'll get on to the problem of the anti-free speech law later in the programme, Paul. Thomas says hi. Jonathan says numbers have not been great for Trump, but people do not tell the truth in the polls. That's absolutely so, especially when there may be threats against them. People will be honest in the privacy of the polling booth. And Dorothea says, such sad news about Sean Connery. Well, I'm told he was 90 years old, so he had a good run, didn't he? He had a good run. Good old Sean. So yeah, talking about the COVID carry-on pantomime, as we have named it, the headlines on the news this morning, especially in the newspapers, were just, the kind of ridiculous, really. Unfortunately, the Scotsman newspaper is reporting that the Education Secretary here in Scotland, slender man Swinney, is going to enforce the compulsory mask wearing for older children, whatever that means, in schools. Well, that's very sad, and that's just Slender Man Swinney scaring the children on Halloween, and adults shouldn't behave like that towards children. They really shouldn't, especially when they should know better. And so Slender Man Swinney doesn't seem to understand. Slender Man, by the way, is an American Gothic horror character who looks a lot like a certain education secretary. Now, Slender Man Swinney scaring the children. Masks, of course, don't work. As we always say, the reason that surgeons wear a mask is so that they do not physically splutter particles of phlegm into open wounds. That's why surgeons wear masks. It's not to stop viruses. Masks stop viruses in the same way that underpants stop farts, to be crude about it. In other words, they don't. What they do is ensure that you breathe in your own CO2, which is not good for you. It's not good for you at all. And in fact, especially if you're elderly or if you're pregnant, it's very bad for you to be breathing in your own CO2. So it's a disgrace that Slender Man Swinney is scaring the children in this way, especially when the children are not in danger. The average age of death from this, which has a 99.8% recovery rate, the average age of death is older than the average life expectancy in the United Kingdom. And that's if you believe that these people died of COVID and not with COVID complicating other comorbidities. So that's what we have to say with masks. Unfortunately, when you make it the law, it's very difficult for people to have the courage to go against that, and the system understands that, and that's why they're always keen to shame people into forms of behavior that normally under your own steam you would not tolerate. Lots of good comments coming in here on YouTube. Swinney is a rocket, says Thomas. Richard laughs there. Richard says, may as well use your fresh underpants as masks. Well, it would probably have about the same effect. Jonathan, such an important distinction. Greg says, good afternoon on Facebook. Somebody suggesting there should be temperature checks at school. Well, that would certainly allow the school simply to know if the child was suffering from a normal cold, which of course many children do on a regular basis. That's for certain. Sandra from sunny Govan, good stuff. Great part of Glasgow is Govan. Dave, keep up the good fight. Dave, we will keep up the good fight. And Karen from Falkirk, nice to see you on, Karen. Hope that you are keeping well. And Paul from Renfrew John says, keep up the fantastic work. Well, let's continue to do that with your help. What else was there this morning on the papers? I had it noted down here. Yeah, obviously the Times newspaper is saying that England is heading for a complete lockdown prior to Christmas, probably ending on the 1st of December. No doubt we'll hear about that very shortly. But this is, well, we don't agree with lockdowns in the first place. This is going to raise a very interesting point of contention, it might be said, because, and I'm grateful for somebody pointing this out to me this morning, if England goes into full lockdown, then Rishi is going to make furlough payments to the businesses and the people who have been deliberately put out of work. And that will help to an extent. However, here in Scotland, if we remain stuck in Nicola Sturgeon's complicated 5-tier tragedy in a sort of halfway house, that means that with different parts of us all stuck in different ways, and with businesses not able to make money properly, they're all going to suffer, yet they will not be eligible for any furlough payments. So many of them would rather probably have been locked down entirely so they could at least get a furlough payment. So this just shows again the complications of devolving the crisis, something that was never going to end well, which 31 weeks ago, when we started this program, we pointed out this is not going to end well. It's only going to compound the crisis. And this is what it has in fact done. And we hold to the point of view that if Boris had maintained control over all parts of the United Kingdom, this crisis could not have continued. Because what would have happened sometime shortly after the Queen gave that broadcast, all the devolved assemblies would start to push back against the centre, and they would start to say, okay, we've had enough, let's get back to normal, because it would have suited them politically to be seen to be pushing back against Boris. And Boris would have realised that the situation was unsustainable, and he would have quickly backtracked, and the political system would have changed in such a way that we would all be back to normal again. But because he devolved the crisis, what that meant was that every part of the UK, Holyrood, Cardiff and Stormont, all had a vested interest in seeing who could lock down the best, seeing who could use the lockdowns against each other to have a better lockdown. And all that did was perpetuate the lockdown. And that's why we're still stuck in it. Britain's strange constitutional situation has compounded the lockdown, whereas if Boris had tried to remain in control of it all from the start, we would probably be out of this by now, because he would have found that it was not a sustainable thing for him to attempt to do. That's our theory. We're not going to write a book about it, but somebody should write a book about it, because we believe that devolution has perpetuated this lockdown crisis. Devolving the crisis has simply compounded it. And other news, of course, in the Daily Mail today, singing is going to be banned at remembrance services, as it's banned also in churches as well. And that seems to us absolutely crazy, indeed almost evil, because singing is important for the heart. It gives the heart hope. That's the point why you sing in church. So to actually ban singing in churches, I'm surprised that the religious organizations have not pushed back against that. I'm disappointed that they've not pushed back against that, because they really should. They really should. So what's the explanation for all of this? Get to that in a moment. Anthony says, hello from Brighton in England. I hope it's a nice sunny day down in Brighton. And hello from Ochtar Ardar. Hello from Ochtar Ardar, says Scott. Rich says, all the best to my fellow countrymen and women from all over the UK and overseas. Amen to that. Malcolm says, you do a fantastic job. Together we will defeat the virus. That is the SNP. Yes, we will, and we must do that, because the future of all the United Kingdom depends upon it. More about that later in the programme. Graham says, tragedy is an understatement. We are suffering. We certainly are. And many of us, you know, I don't know, it's okay, I suppose, if you've got like a big house with a big garden or something and life just seems to go on as normal. But if you're living in a small flat with a big family, these things are just these things are not good, and we shouldn't tolerate them. Chick says, does the common cold or flu not exist anymore? Everything seems to be called COVID. I think that's basically how they're playing it. Marks from Sheffield says, united we stand. Absolutely. United we stand, divided we fall. And here in A Force for Good offices is where we're British, we love the UK, and we want us to stay together, and we will do everything that we can in our power to keep us together. Dorothea says, I do think, Alistair, that the UK would be in a much better place if we had a whole UK approach to the pandemic. I agree with you, Dorothea. Mr. Galaxy Man 57 says that a child has passed out in school from wearing a mask. Well, I'm sure that's the case. I'm amazed that more children have not passed out from doing that. Fuse says, a great evil is stalking the land, and the first thing they do is close the churches. Well, that's the first thing that they did, and the churches went along with it. Maybe they felt they were in a bind that they couldn't stand out against it for some reason. But when people need hope, they often turn to the churches, and they certainly didn't get that hope, certainly in the first few weeks of the pandemic, so-called scamdemic, probably more like. Anyway, what is the reason for this? Why are the politicians doubling down in this way? And you know, the Daily Telegraph has been very good on this. It's given up on it. Well, it is promoting articles against COVID lockdowns more than any other newspaper that I have noticed. And somebody wrote here, why are we playing this ruinous game with our lives? Annabelle Fennick Elliott on the 24th of October, and she wrote some quite wise words. She said, good old-fashioned peer pressure seems to play a big part, and we shouldn't discount the extent to which peer pressure does force many of us to go along with things in all parts of our life, whether we want to or not, and very often against our better judgment. She says, Boris initially stood firm on refusing to join the rest of Europe's unprecedented and untested lockdown hypothesis, but ultimately he fell. It wouldn't be the first time in history that vast numbers of otherwise sane people have succumbed to a case of mass hysteria. And she goes on and she says, Occam's razor would suggest. Now, Occam's razor is a philosophical point which says that if there are two explanations to something, then the one that requires the fewest assumptions is probably the correct one, or more likely to be correct. So she says Occam's razor here suggests that they were merely too stubborn to concede that they were wrong in their approach to this. Not just slightly, but catastrophically wrong. Governments are continuing with these lockdowns because their scientific advisors are so emotionally invested in their initial predictions, believes a person that she's just spoken to. But it's not just our leaders. The prospect for most citizens that we've wasted nearly a year of our lives for no good reason is just too bitter a pill to swallow. Most of us are happier telling ourselves that it was all warranted and for the greater good. And that just may be the reason for all of this sheer stubbornness and not willing to accept that we may have misjudged everything. That's the straightforward explanation, no doubt. Derek says, keep up the good work, fella. Thank you. We will. Richard, who is a churchgoer, he says, we just recite the Psalms. It would be quite easy to sing. The churches that are open are probably safer than pubs or restaurants. William says, maybe I am a bit paranoid, but can what is happening to our churches end up in the demise of Christianity? Well, it's a good point. It's a good point, William. And if you're closing down any institution, it's always going to be difficult for it to build back up again. And certainly I know that a lot of churches depend for their income upon weekly collections, which have all gone by the wayside now, of course. And so the Church of Scotland is suffering, and the Church of England, no doubt, as well, and will no doubt sell off more of their real estate in order to try to make up the lost funds. So you could have a point there, William. Well, we're going to go on and talk briefly about the American election. We cannot avoid talking about the American election. Goodness me, one of the most important elections in our lifetimes, an election that is going to determine the future of not just America, but the Western world, because the two options that are available are so distinctively different. So we're going to talk about that on our YouTube channel, folks. If you're watching on Facebook, please come over. We'll just put up the link there. We'll put the link to our YouTube broadcast under some of the comments as well. And just come on over and watch us, please, on YouTube, where we're just continuing, and we'll be continuing for the next half hour or so on these matters. We're also going to talk about Humza's hate bill, his anti-free speech law, and how he wants to police your dinner table at Christmas. And we'll also, of course, be speaking about how to keep the union together. And we read this week about a concept called a Clarity Act, which we're well aware of, and we're going to talk about that as well as this week in British history. A lot going on, and we've also got a new piece of merchandise which we are going to show you, all ready for Christmas. Okay, so please come over and see us on our YouTube broadcast, and we'll put the link up there. Just click on it and come through, because we need the hours up on YouTube and we need the subscribers on YouTube. Okay, folks, take care. See you on YouTube. Okay, we're on YouTube. Thank you for folk coming through from Facebook. Thank you to folk coming through on Facebook. Please comment in the chat if you are if you've got a YouTube account. So let's basically go on to the Humza Yousaf hate speech bill. Now, this week he made it clear that if you say something that he does not like around the kitchen table or around the Christmas dinner table, and say you've got a family member that is not that keen on you and thinks that they want to cause you trouble, they can report you to the police. Now, normally that would not, if such a speech like that had occurred in the home, there's a domestic defense. You don't have to, you're not going to be prosecuted for it. However, what Humza, the so-called Justice Secretary, wants to do is literally to prosecute you for for saying a few words around your dinner table. So that is an unprecedented invasion of a Britain's right to the privacy of his or her own home. They used to say a Britain's home is his castle. Well, it doesn't appear so in Scotland if Humza Yousaf and the SNP get their way. Now, this has to get thrown out. There is no question this has to get thrown out, because if this came in, then, you know, this would actually be worse than in Russia. There would be more free speech in Russia than there would be in Scotland if Yousaf's bill came in. So we have to appeal to all of the MSPs in the Labour and Lib Dem camps, as well as the Tories, to vote against it and to argue strongly to get this out of the bill. To get it out of the bill. In fact, the whole bill actually should be ditched. But politically, of course, we know that's a big ask. And the SNP are very keen to get it through before next Holyrood's election. So it's on the statute book, come what may. But really, there's so much of that bill just needs to be swept away. And we have hope that so much of it will be swept away, not just this idea of the dinner table convictions, but also other things such as protected characteristics. Now, a protected characteristic is they list them all. We're not going to list them all, but if you fall into one of those categories, and if somebody says something against you, then the penalty is harsher because it was you that they said it against. And this is absolutely crazy, because it's saying that some people's opinions and sensitivities and rights are more protected than others. And the idea of protected characteristics came in with a Westminster Act. Now, I'll need to check up on the dates of that, but they want to bring it in Scotland for this matter. And very few people have the nerve these days to argue against protected characteristics, to say that it's an unlawful and an illegitimate legal form. Very few people will do that now. It's one of these things that has become sort of established with time, but it still is wrong. Just as it was wrong, I think it was in the 80s, it's wrong today. And very few people say that. We say it. We said it in our submission to the Justice so-called committee's research on the matter, and we'll put that up. We wrote it in an article, Free Speech for Scots. That's up on our website. We'll put that up there in the link. We said that protected characteristics was completely a wrong legal concept. Somebody else has also said that. We're pleased to see an academic called Carlton Brick has written an article on this as well, which we'll also put it up. And he sums it up very well. He says, by introducing so-called protected characteristics, the Scottish administration plans to allow the courts to punish alleged hate crimes more severely than other offences. Their argument that offences committed against victims who identify with these characteristics should be punished much more severely than an offence committed against someone who does not have them threatens to undermine the right of citizens to be treated equally before the law. Amen to that. Amen to that. It's an absurd legal concept, and it needs to get in the bin. And who among us will say that politically? That's the question. And when you find the answer, please tell us. Christopher says protected characteristics are simply arbitrary. Basically, that's correct. So it's all of a one with trying to create a situation where those words that you don't like get removed, and don't just get removed from society, but get punished. And how the world goes on this is going to be determined by the result of Tuesday's election. Because if Trump is elected, Trump will move to stop the social media companies arbitrarily banning people. There will be changes coming along that will make the social media companies a lot less likely to ban people on these sorts of grounds. If Biden wins, he will give the green light to these social media companies to continue to censor and to continue to suppress what they don't like. And there's no question that's the way that it's going to go. Now, for 4 years, Trump and we here in the UK dropped the ball on this. But recent events have shown that the time for change is now. As many of you know, we at A Force for Good had the world's leading pro-unionist Twitter account, over 30,000 followers, and we were arbitrarily removed. And we're still appealing that, and we're still hopeful that sense will prevail, perhaps when new regulations kick in, they might allow us back on. But we know what it's like to suffer from that. So we can't get onto Twitter anymore. So just having said that, if you're on Twitter, please do share the link to our videos on there. Please do share the link to our articles on Twitter, because we used to be able to reach millions a year, at least 1 million a month. And now we can't reach anybody. So if you can help us on Twitter, please, we'd be very grateful if you could do so. And another point that occurred to us, you know, the Scottish newspapers, the Herald and the Scotsman, they will very often put out tweets on interesting matters that we at Force for Good found interesting. And we would retweet the Herald or the Scotsman. And we would be the only people retweeting their article. So the Herald would put it out, their tweet would fall flat. We would be the one person that retweeted it, and it would go out and it would suddenly take off. So really the Herald and the Scotsman should be fighting our corner, because we were a hub that pushed their articles. If their articles were pro-union, we would push it out. It would get seen. If it was something tangentially related to the union, we would push it out. It would get seen. If we didn't do it for them, nobody would retweet their stuff. And I was looking at just on Twitter yesterday at this, like a lot of the articles from the Herald and Scotsman that we would have retweeted, they have no retweets. But I know if a Force for Good had still been on Twitter, we would have clicked that button, it would have gone out, and it would have been seen by thousands of people, thousands of our followers. So we need the Scottish media to step up for this as well, to step up to defend the rights of groups such as ourselves. They get arbitrarily dismissed from these platforms. And we'll always give a punt to this book, Deleted by Alistair McConnachie, which sets out for the first time in a mainstream book the problem with social media. And he covers all of these organizations, from Google to Twitter to YouTube to Wikipedia as well. And he shows how they work, and he shows the problems. So this is a really good book, and we're 2/3 of the way through it now. So we'll stick the link up to that as well. Richard says, Trump's an unusual personality, but he's got a lot of good people around him. If Biden wins, the BLM, Antifa, SJWs, etc. will get their way. That's basically what one is looking at. And I find it really quite remarkable that so many so-called conservative outlets and even politicians in the UK support Biden. You have to wonder what's going on there. Very strange indeed. Ain't I So Funny says, think Trump will win. Oh, he will win. There's no question about that. There's no question that he will. The only question is to what extent the mail-in ballots will be manipulated to hold up the election. That's a possible danger. And that's why the Democrats have promoted mail-in balloting this year to an unprecedented extent. And Trump will also get the highest Black and Latino vote of any Republican president ever. You can take that to the bank quite literally if you want, but it is true for those of us who look at this, who are seeing it on social media and watching his rallies. Then there's no way you can come to any other conclusion. Do you know, the Kamala Harris, for example, you can see on Twitter this morning, she I don't know if it was Los Angeles or California or something, she comes onto stage shouting about great to see you. And if you pan back, there's about 8 people seated in socially distanced form in somebody's back garden. Whereas the Trump rallies, and he holds about 3 a day all over America. It's really a very unusual and quite remarkable, especially for a man of his age. They're attended by thousands and thousands of people. And just a wee tip here, the best YouTube channel to watch the Trump rallies on is Right Side Broadcasting, which is a very good smaller outfit. And their camera people will scan the crowd so you can see the entire crowd, whereas the mainstream media simply focus on Trump and they don't move the camera, so you don't see and you don't get any idea of who he's talking to. Whereas the right side broadcasting, RSB broadcasting on YouTube, they show the rallies from start to finish, and they'll have a 2-hour lead in, and they'll have commentators speaking and so on, and it's quite exciting. And I watched one the other day, and the Trump plane comes in to land while Eye of the Tiger is playing loudly on the speakers. And it's really quite something. And then, of course, when he finishes, as soon as he finishes, they start singing YMCA. The YMCA music kicks in, and Trump does his little Trump dance, which somebody asked me to do today, but I'm not going to do a Trump dance for you quite yet. So it's all very interesting. It's like you're right there. This is the wonders of modern technology. Wonders of modern technology. It's incredible. Fuse says, forget Twitter, it's done. Use Gab instead. We've heard of that. We've never been on Gab. I'm aware of Gab. And what we're doing at the moment is using Parler, PARLER.com, which is not an alternative to Twitter because it's hugely USA based. But we're on Parler.com. So if you're on Parler.com, please do give us a follow on that. And of course, we've also got other, we're also in Instagram.com. And this morning we passed 4,400 followers on Instagram. We are the biggest pro-union page on Instagram, I'm very pleased to say. And we've got a lot of good traction on Instagram, a lot of people there, especially a lot of younger people, younger demographic on Instagram. And we have a great Instagram team and a great Instagram curator. So thank you to the Instagram team. Christopher says, Biden is no fan of the UK and he could be a real problem for us. And Biden will push all the PC stuff to further extremes. That's so, and his running mate Kamala Harris will also do the same. And Biden, and I mentioned this last week, but Biden is very much coming from an Irish Republican point of view, and he says that he will not support a British Brexit that involves putting any kind of hard border between the north of Northern Ireland and the Republic. He wants the hard border to be in the middle of the Irish Sea, separating Great Britain from Northern Ireland. So that shows you how much of a supporter of the United Kingdom that man is. So no, it would be, and he wouldn't be up for doing any kind of trade deals with the United Kingdom either, unless he got his way. So he would insist on putting a hard border down the Irish Sea and essentially breaking up the United Kingdom, which of course as Unionists we cannot have. It's non-negotiable. You cannot have that. You cannot have a hard border down the Irish Sea and pretend to be a Unionist. You cannot have that. Richard says, how do we get our emojis onto the YouTube live chat? I'm not sure how to do that, Richard. If anybody knows how you put emojis onto YouTube live chat, please put a message there to help Richard out. Jonathan says, what we know that the EU has been trying to make Northern Ireland the price of Brexit. James has got an emoji up there, so it must be able to be done, Richard. If James, can you tell Richard how you managed to put up your emoji of somebody waving at us, please? Thanks. So yeah, now I was going to be speaking about the Clarity Act, or the concept of a Clarity Act. That's quite a big concept, so I'm not going to go there. But what I'm going to do instead, in the time that we have remaining, is just quickly mention something here, a letter that I saw in the Daily Telegraph. Now, this letter in the Daily Telegraph of the 23rd of October was from somebody in Hampshire, and they were saying that And we hear a version of this in various ways, and we've always heard it for several years, that why don't you give the English a vote, and you might be surprised at the result of such a referendum, and the Scots will finally leave us in peace. This is the idea. Some people in England think that if the SNP won a referendum, that somehow that would be the end of their complaints, and they wouldn't ever have to see Nicola Sturgeon or some angry Scotsman on their news every single day. Well, I have to inform you that whatever might happen in such a referendum, you won't stop hearing these angry Scots people. You won't stop hearing it. Imagine if Scotland did become so-called independent from whatever remained of the rest of a destroyed United Kingdom. Do you think that's the last time you're going to ever hear about what's happening in Scotland? No, because what you would find is that every single thing that went wrong in Scotland, and so much would go wrong in a separated Scotland, every single thing would be laid at your door. It would be laid at the Parliament that was remaining in Westminster, or it would be laid at the door of some English Parliament if such a thing were ever to be created. Because here is the thing about some of these Scottish nationalists, especially the ones that get to be legislators and MPs and MSPs. Their entire modus operandi is to complain about England, the rest of the UK, London, the British, the Union Jack. Their nature is to complain. That's why they gravitate to Scottish separatism as a political ideology, because it helps and it promotes their natural pessimism and sense of grievance, and often anger, and often bitterness as well. It's unusual in political ideologies, but Scottish separatism is certainly one of those ideologies. So they will always complain. They will always complain, and you'll never get peace, I'm afraid. You'll never get peace. The only way you get peace is like back a few years ago when the SNP were not the majority party. If they can be moved down or made irrelevant in some way, then they're not going to be on the telly so much, whether that's here in Scotland or whether it's British-wide. So the only way that you do it, the only way you're going to get peace if you're in England, is if we here in Scotland can somehow marginalise the SNP. But if we can't do that, then all of us are going to be subject to this forevermore, forevermore. And it doesn't matter if Scotland is separated or independent, if you want to call it like that, if you're a nationalist, it doesn't matter. What it means is that you'll still listen to these whinging Scottish people, these whinging Scottish politicians. I mean, we knew of their existence long before they ended up on the television in the rest of the United Kingdom. We knew that type of Scottish person, and we're like, please don't give them power, please. But unfortunately, they got power. And the question now is, how do we get them back in their box again? And that's going to be a long, tedious process, but it will be done. It will be done. But don't think, please don't think that if Scotland became independent, you would never hear from them again. You would hear from them, except you'd hear from them louder. Sad, but true. So that's all we're going to say about whinging Scottish politicians for the time being. Now, I'm going to speak now about this week in British history, and I'm also going to show you a really good piece of merchandise that we're really proud of, that we have created, a complete first. And I'll get to that on the appropriate day here that I talk about. So this coming week in British history, which is to say the 31st of October today to the 6th of November. Now today, on the 31st of October in 1739, a child was born who would become the great British patriot and architect James Craig, who created Edinburgh New Town. Now, Edinburgh has an old town, which sits up on the hill, up where the castle is. And it has a new town, which is built below Prince's Street Gardens. And he was a man who contributed immensely to the grandeur and the Britishness of Edinburgh. And in 1767, he won a competition to design the new town. And get this, he wanted to design it in the shape of a Union Jack. Okay. And you can see, and this week on our Facebook page, we'll put out that drawing of his, of the new town in the shape of a Union Jack. At the end of the day, it proved too complicated a thought. So he designed it instead in a simple grid mechanism. But his patriotic theme continued with Queen Street, with George Street, named after King George, and Prince's Street, which was named in honour of the royal family of George III. Cumberland Street was named after the Duke of Cumberland, Hanover Street after the House of Hanover, Frederick Street after George III's father, and Rose and Thistle Streets, which are in the centre of Edinburgh, are, of course, named after the English and Scottish emblems. And Charlotte Square was named after Queen Charlotte, who was the Queen Consort of George III. So they were a very British patriotic family, the Craigs, because his uncle, which is to say his mother's brother, was James Thompson, who was the Scotsman who wrote Rule Britannia. Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never, never shall be slaves. A song that we quote here in our wee book for the Union, which is only a £5, and we'll put up the link to that. Get yours. Christmas is coming, as they say. On the 2nd of November last year, a Force for Good was in George Square, and we were there with a couple of hundred colleagues and friends and supporters, and maybe you were there too, and if you were, please tell us in the comments, because Nicola Sturgeon had decided to make an appearance, and so we organised a Get Sturgeon Telt rally, and goodness me, we got her told. In fact, when it was a great afternoon, and many of you will remember it, and we'll put up the link to the report there. And we were shouting her. We had a bullhorn and we had whistles, and when the minute she started up, we drowned her out. And that's the reason she's so angry in that video. You know, the one where she says, "Scotland is an inclusive, welcoming place, and no Tory is going to stop it," which a complete ironic an ironic thing to say, contradictory thing to say we're inclusive and also to condemn people who don't agree because they're Tories. But the mask fell, and it was we who were the people who made that mask fall, because she was so angry. She was so angry that we were there. And that was some day, because the police, we always work closely, of course, in our work with the police, and the police had cornered every avenue into George Square, police everywhere, vans stopping, cars, really quite remarkable and exciting. And if you want to join with us, hopefully next year, if this COVID carry-on pantomime has stopped, we'll be back on the street and we'll be meeting the Scottish Nationalist Party supporters at their marches. And if you want to join our thin red line, please tell us, because we need you to help with that. And if you maybe can't help with that, maybe you can go to aforceforgood.uk. We've got some fantastic merchandise there. I see somebody's asking, where do I get this t-shirt? Well, we've got this t-shirt and other t-shirts. Some say Scottish and British, and we've got a saltire here and a Union Jack here. English and British, British Ulster, Welsh and British with a Union Jack and a dragon. So we've got all of that at our Teespring store, and we'll put up the link to that. You can get our t-shirts at our Teespring store. So that was the Sturgeon rally, and the Daily Express did a report on that, and they said that we humiliated Sturgeon, which was absolutely correct. We did. Unfortunately, a particular MSP complained about that and got the Daily Express to remove the article in its entirety, even though it was trending at #1. So you can't find that article on the website anymore unless you use the Wayback Machine. So we'll put up the link to the Wayback Machine's article, which is the trending article that the Daily Express put out on the 3rd of November, which trended worldwide at #1 on the Daily Express site, but which got removed because the SNP complained about it. Think about that. Think about that. And also think about the power that are force for good. Think about how we scared the powers that be as well. So we're really good value for money, a force for good. We really are fantastic, fantastic value for money. What we and our fantastic activists get up to. We really are, you know. And we have a niche that nobody else can fill. There's other good groups out there, but we have got this street campaigning niche that none of the other groups can fill. So if you support that, then buy some of our merchandise. We've got this fantastic wee badge here, and we've got this badge here, which is the King James VI Union Jack. We'll put up the links to those as well. On the 5th of November, people think of Guy Fawkes Day. That's certainly true, when Guy Fawkes wanted to destroy James VI again, but was foiled. However, another important thing happened on the 5th of November in 1688. And I don't need to tell many of you that that was when Prince William of Orange landed at Brixham in Devon and brought with him 11,000 soldiers and 4,000 horses. And within a month, he had arrived in London, and James VII had fled to France. And that's what's known as the Glorious Revolution. And it brought in what we understand today as our constitutional monarchy. And William and Mary have been our only joint monarchs, the only king and queen together. It's usually a queen with a king consort or a king with a queen consort. But today, back then, it was William and Mary, joint monarchs. And that brings us to our piece of new merchandise, which we've got, which is a Christmas card, which says, "Wishing you a glorious British Christmas." And what we've got here is Queen Mary and King William, and then in chronological order, with the dates marked, all the kings and queens right up until Queen Elizabeth today. Wishing you a glorious British Christmas. And on the back, we have our British monarchs since the glorious revolution of William and Mary. God save the Queen, forceforgood.uk. Now we'll put up the link to that. We're now selling these in our shop, and they are £4 for 5 cards. Now they're blank inside for your own message, and the £4 includes post and packing. Please note though, we're not selling them with envelopes. Now these are A5 in size, so you'd need an A5 envelope. But this in itself is an educational little tool in itself. I mean, this would look great forever. Just, you can look back on this and say, who was the king then, who was the queen then, and it's all just laid there in chronological order. It's really, really attractive little thing. Now here's a gift for our union supporters. Now, if you're a union supporter, which means that you're donating to us monthly, then you can have these for free. Okay, you can have a pack for free. So if you're a union supporter donating upwards of a £5 a month or whatever you're donating, then please just drop us an email, tell us your name and we'll send a pack of these, a pack of 5 to you free of charge if you're a union supporter. If you're not a union supporter, please go to aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters, where if you want, you can become a monthly donor. But for now, union supporters can request a pack free. That's our gift to you to thank you. If you're not a union supporter, it's £4 for a pack of 5. Derek says we need groups so we can not just be in one place. That's true. It's about finding people who want to organize local groups, though. That's the thing. If we can find people who want to set up a local group, then we can speak to them about that. And also on the 5th of November in 1603, Sir Arthur Chichester was granted for services to the crown the castle of something called Belfast and associated lands, which he began to establish as the town and city of Belfast. That was on the 5th of November as well, and that was back in 1603. So come home to Belfast town, as the song says. Thomas says he's just ordered his. Fantastic, Thomas. Fantastic. Well, please spread the word. If you think that there's people who would like our wishing you a glorious British Christmas cards, please tell us. If you'd like a big number of these, contact us and we might be able to do a deal for you. And when I say big number, I mean like 50 or whatever. Please ask us. But otherwise, 5 for £4, including postage and packing. Envelopes not included, and blank inside. Okay, folks, covered a lot today. Lots of stuff we could have covered. There's a day coming up when we will have the opportunity to cover as much as we want, but we're keeping that day quiet for the moment. But next month, we'll tell you all about a broadcasting plan that we have got in the works. Very exciting. I'll speak to you about that at a later date. For the moment, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching on YouTube. Thank you to those also who were watching earlier on Facebook. I hope many of you came over, and we'll be here next Saturday, same time. Please do tune in. If you haven't subscribed to us, please do subscribe. If it asks you to create a Google account, you may have to create a Google account before you can actually sign up. But please do hit that red button to subscribe if you can, and please hit the bell for notifications and give us a thumbs up as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen.